What's it like to start a brand new tourist railroad in the 21st century? Today on the Roundhouse, we're visiting the Allentown and Auburn Railroad to find out. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozerak, and this is episode number 77 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. Today, we are talking to Mike Bast. He is one of the founders of the Allentown and Auburn Railroad, a short tourist railroad in Pennsylvania, about what it takes to start a tourist railroad in this century. Because the Allentown and Auburn's only a few years old. So we're going to find out some of the challenges that he and his team have faced and how they've overcome them and what sets the Allentown and Auburn apart. And I know that I begin every episode with saying you name it and we discuss it, but that's because that's how it works. Today's episode was suggested by Dan Tomlinson. So Dan, thank you for suggesting this. And I love hearing your suggestions for episodes. You can submit yours at theroundhousepodcast.com. Before we get to that, though, a couple things. First, I want to thank our new Patreon subscriber, Carl Prakashana. Thank you so much for supporting the Roundhouse financially. Every dollar that we earn goes that much closer to being able to do cool episodes where we go out on the road, on the rails. And so I thank you for your support. If you want to get early access to episodes and other perks, go to patreon.com/theroundhouse. Second thing, I talked about this at the end of the last episode, but I want to briefly mention it here. I have started in my hometown of Meadville, Pennsylvania, a model railroad club designed for middle and high school students called Meadville Model Railroad Club. If you want to check us out, we are on Facebook and Instagram. And this is going to be an experiment because we talk so much about how to get younger generations interested in trains and railroads. This is my own experiment with the French Creek Valley Railroad Historical Society to see how we can make that happen in my area. And so if you want to see what we're going to be doing, it's going to be an after-school program running through the school year, and it's going to start in September. So that's part of why this episode's taking a little longer to get out, and I apologize for that. But this is something that is going to be interesting to explore, and I'll give you little updates along the way. We're going to be building an entire train layout from scratch. Again, you can check it out on Facebook at Meadville Model Railroad Club or on the website meadvillemodelrailroadclub.com. Our guest today is the president of the Allentown and Auburn Railroad, which is a tourist railroad in eastern Pennsylvania. Get this, they incorporated in 2014, and in 2015, they were already beginning their first season of excursions. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Mike Bast.
Hello, Nick.
Tell me, Mike, how did you get started in trains and railroads?
When I was just a little lad, my parents took me to Strasburg, and that was kind of the beginning of it all. My dad tells a story that when we went, they blew the whistle, and I was completely scared. He thought he'd never have to deal with it again, and it turns out he was incredibly wrong. It was just that beginning. We had model trains and stuff at Christmas time and whatnot, and kind of just grew from there. There were some family connections to railroading. Great-grandparents worked for the Reading and the Pennsylvania Railroad. So it was kind of just a gradual growth of interest in the industry. When I was 11, I had gotten involved with the Reading Company Technical Historical Society and started working on the equipment in Leesport. And as they say, the rest is history.
You mentioned Strasburg, and we've previously on the show interviewed President Lynn Modiner. And obviously there's a lot of tourist railroads to draw inspiration from, even in the state of Pennsylvania. How would you say seeing the stories of the formations of other tourist railroads influenced your path?
Because I got involved with the Reading Company Technical Historical Society, I had spent a lot of time in and around the Blue Mountain and Reading. A lot of what I seen go on, was watching what Andy Muller was doing on the Blue Mountain in the mid-'80s and into the '90s, and being involved with Reading Tech, the trains would run right through the middle of the Leesport yard there. So if anything, the Reading Tech and the Blue Mountain Reading was more of an influence to where I am now with the connection to the Reading and so on. But I mean, Strasburg and I rode New Hope and rail tours and stuff as a kid and everything, and East Broadtop, and each place has its own unique flavor. It all kind of helps to what we're doing now.
I'm going to be honest and completely biased here, but you'd agree with me. Pennsylvania is a great state. It's a very diverse state. And it makes sense to have all these tourist railroads and museums because you get a different flavor of the state at each one.
Most definitely. I mean, even in the area where we're at, I mean, we have the Wanamaker Kempton and Southern 12 miles away from us. You have the Colebrookdale down in Boyertown. You have the Reading and Northern running. And what's nice is all of us kind of have our own unique flavor, our own unique operation. I mean, you can go all day long on the Reading and Northern now and take an excursion behind 425 and spend all day. You can go to the Colebrookdale and sit down and have a nice meal. Kempton has their theme trains and all day passes and so on. So each place is kind of different. And then you throw in the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania and Steamtown and so on, the different trolley museums. I mean, there's truly just a mass of railroad history and so on in the area. And it's a pretty neat state if you're a rail fan. And, just over in New Jersey, you got the Black River and Western and the Susquehanna Tech folks offering their excursions as well. So it's definitely the place to be if you like trains.
With a ton of railroad history and a ton of tourist railroad history, what led to the formation of your railroad, the Allentown in Auburn?
What happened is, kind of the backstory here to all this is, back in 2003, 2002, somewhere in that range, a friend of mine came to me and asked me if I would go along with a locomotive he was going to lease. And he was in the process of setting up a lease arrangement with George Hart to operate a U-30 up at the Rail Tours Incorporated in Jim Thorpe. So I went along and I started helping out with George and Rail Tours and kind of wound up getting more involved up there than just taking care of the leased locomotive. One thing led to another, and at the time, the Stourbridge Railroad had a failure on their BL2. They contacted George, and George wanted to help them out, so I went up to Stourbridge and worked on the BL2 and whatnot. We got involved up there because of some changes that had gone up in the Stourbridge. And at that point, we decided to incorporate our first company, which was Central Pennsylvania Rail Corporation. We ran the Stourbridge for about 2.5 years, and there was a lot of folks from Rail Tours involved and so on. There was, again, change in management at the Stourbridge, and we needed a place to go with our tools and machinery and so on. So we actually wound up going back to the shop in Topton and leasing the shop, which was at that point separate from the railroad. And we leased that from the borough of Kutztown, and we took all our stuff back to Topton. And at the time, the East Penn was running the branch there between Kutztown and Topton, and the foundry was still doing their pours and whatnot. And so we just kind of did our thing there in the shop, and eventually the foundry closed. And East Penn said that they no longer wanted to operate the line. And at that point, they were in the planning stages of starting the Kutztown Bicentennial. We started working with Jim Schlegel and his folks from the borough, and part of that was they wanted to run passenger trains for the bicentennial. So East Penn gracefully bowed out. We stepped up and we'd say that we're going to run the passenger trains for the bicentennial. And that's how we started the Allentown and Auburn. The Allentown and Auburn came out of, you can track its roots back to rail tours and operating the store bridge in Central Penn and so on. And that's where the Allentown and Auburn started from. We started our train rides for Easter 2015. Basically, we've been running ever since.
For people who've never been to your railroad, describe the nature of the line, the scenery, and the equipment you use.
All right. The line between Kutztown and Topton was originally graded by the Allentown Auburn back in the 1850s, and they never built any railroad on it. The Reading Company bought the right-of-way, and they built the track into Kutztown and connected it with their East Penn branch. They built the station in Kutztown, and the whole branch has the typical Reading feel to it. You know, the station's painted brown and cream, and it's a typical combined passenger freight station that you've seen in a lot of the communities along the Reading. The branch goes out to Topton, and it meanders through farm fields and through farms and through some woods and whatnot. You get to see basically the Amish and Mennonite countryside. It's, unfortunately getting rapidly developed, and thankfully most of our right-of-way is adjacent with farms that are in protection. So the scenery that we have at this point will be preserved indefinitely. It's a nice country ride that we provide.
It really sounds like very beautiful countryside. Now, Al Gallo wants to know what it's like, from your perspective, to operate a tourist or a short line railroad.
The Allentown Auburn is incorporated as a common carrier railroad. We have the obligation to provide freight service if anybody needs it. And then the tourist train, even though it was where we got our start, was not the prime focus. Our main goal is to develop a base of freight operations and so on. It's a challenge because the protected farms and everything, there's no room for industrial type development. So our market is kind of slim. But it's neat. It's neat having the opportunity to try to do this. And thankfully the tourist train has been well received, and that keeps us moving ahead. In the meantime, we're working on whatever we can for freight.
How have the communities been supportive of you in terms of helping to bring in tourists and helping to develop business and potentially industry?
To be honest with you, if it wouldn't be for the generosity and the working relationship we have with the Kutztown Transportation Authority, its board members, the borough, and so on, we would not be as successful as we are. They are a very, very good organization. The folks that are on the board are very much community-oriented, and they want to see their community prosper and the railroad prosper. And they have been just extraordinary to work with. The borough has the Kutztown Community Partnership in there. That's a separate organization, and folks like Joel Seidel, who's one of the local business owners there, he has been absolutely a wonderful support system for us. Some of the local businesses there, they have just been very supportive, very helpful. We try to do as much as we can in the community. When we run our special events, we have the local businesses print the flyers, print the tickets, cater the meals, provide the ice cream, and so on. So we try to keep it as family-oriented as we can, and so far that has been a well-worked plan. I mean, it's working out well for us.
Family-oriented and community-oriented, having that integration, I think, is key, because then you feel embedded in the business culture, where sometimes I think because of the nature of short-line railroads, there's this sort of disconnect, or there can be this disconnect because there's this sense that, oh, it's this larger than life thing, or larger than our town thing anyway, that can sometimes present barriers. So the fact that you've approached businesses to collaborate with them seems like a key ingredient to what you've been developing.
Well, we've also partnered with the Industrial Museum in Bethlehem. So we work with them to do trips. We'll bring people into the railroad. You know, they'll do train rides or whatever during the morning, come back to the station, they'll have a meal, and then we'll bus people out to the Industrial Museum, Reading Tech, so on. So we try to keep people in the area. So far, that's been successful. It does help because people in the community see it as, you know, a win-win from them. You know, we're bringing people in, and then the people are not leaving. They're staying in Kutztown. They're going to the restaurants and walking up Main Street and going to the different shops and everything. So it's good for everybody. And the one nice part about us is working with the people in the town, we're all approachable. I'll go pick up the food, and the guys will be interacting with the other vendors and so on. So it's not this railroad, and it's not distant. I mean, we're walking into the business, we're talking to the people and doing things in the community. So it makes it more personal.
Going back to what it took to get up and running, William Faze asks, besides capital, what was the biggest challenge of starting your railroad?
The biggest challenge was actually getting the equipment moved. Because of the nature of our equipment, all friction bearing and historic type equipment, even though it is up to standards safety-wise and everything, your Class 1 railroads and everything, they're very hesitant to handle that type of equipment. And that was our biggest hurdle, was getting the equipment moved. If it wouldn't have been for Andy Muller and Tyler Glass at the Reading and Northern basically supporting us moving the equipment on Reading and Northern and getting Norfolk Southern, we had a gentleman at Norfolk Southern who went right to Wick Moorman and stepped in, and those 4 people there that really helped us get the equipment moved. And that was the single biggest hurdle we had, was getting that equipment moved. Both Reading and Northern and the Norfolk Southern were both very supportive in that, although it was the biggest hurdle.
What were the main ingredients, if you were to sort of break it down into a recipe for how to bake yourself a tourist railroad? Getting the equipment is one and a vital one. What are some of the other key components that went into the formation of your operation?
The single most important thing that I have going is not the equipment. It's not the railroad itself. It's the people that surround me and support what I'm doing. My wife she's always there. I mean, she's taking care of the ticket sales and promotion and so on. She has done an incredible amount of work to support this. The guys are absolutely wonderful. That is the single most important thing, is the help. I'm blessed with having high-quality people that share a like vision, that are extremely dedicated and loyal. That has to be the most important ingredient to do this, and do this as well as we have, is their loyalty and dedication. That's the most important thing. Beyond the equipment, the railroad, everything. They are the most important part of it.
No doubt, and I'm sure some of you guys would agree that having the right team members for whatever your initiative is makes all the difference. Now, some of the equipment that you were able to acquire and have moved, you have a primarily diesel locomotive at this point in time, operating the excursions that are mainly consisting of old cabooses, and you also have a doodlebug. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have on the railroad is Pennsylvania Railroad 4666, which is a 1930 built Brill doodlebug that ran all over the Pennsy. It was the car got quite a tore the system. It ran New Freedom area, York. It's been over Red Bank. I mean, that car has been up the Schuylkill Division. It's a very well-traveled car. For many years, it sat on the Black River and Western. We had gotten permission from Mr. Mormon to also move that over to the railroad, and we brought that in, and has been an incredible draw for rail fans and the general public, because people are curious what this thing is. It's kind of unusual looking. It sounds unusual. So it's kind of a curiosity for a lot of people.
I have to ask, as a card-carrying Fonda, Johnstown, and Gloversville fan whose railroad used to have a doodlebug that sadly got scrapped, how much would I have to bribe you to paint it in a completely non-prototypical but worthwhile Fonda, Johnstown, and Gloversville paint scheme, as opposed to, say, Pensy, which would be correct?
Well, we've joked around about putting different paint schemes on that car. Since 1930, that car, except for a very brief period, has always read Pennsylvania. So I think it would have to be a pretty big bribe to put something else on there but Pennsylvania.
All right, I put the call out to my FJ&G brothers and sisters to make it happen. So the recent exciting news as of early 2018, when we're recording this, is that you have purchased steam locomotive number 106. What is the story behind this locomotive and its purchase?
Last year, the Pickaway County Agricultural Society, who runs the fair in Pickaway County, ran an article in August saying, "Locomotive Freedom Good Home." They ran the article and it hit the internet, and within about a half an hour, several of my guys were on the phone with me and sending me text messages and so on. And after about an hour of trying, I finally got through to the gentleman who was named in the article at the fairgrounds. And we talked a little bit, and Randy and I kind of hit it off pretty well. And he said, "Well, you're interested? Send us a letter." So we basically sent a letter of intent to them, and so on and so forth. And after some going back and forth, we actually went out and inspected the locomotive. And surprisingly enough, out of all the inquiries they had, there was only two folks that showed up to look at the engine in person, us and another party. We wound up getting the winning bid because other people had started offering money, so we offered up to buy it, and they went with our bid. So that's how we wound up with 106.
What will be required to restore the locomotive to operation?
Well, 106 will need to come back and have a full evaluation and be brought up to current FRA specs. So we'll have to do the ultrasound and new tubes and redo the Form 4 and so on. So it'll go through the same rebuild process that you see going on in other steam locomotives around the country that are currently getting worked on. I mean, just because it's small, we have to go through the same process that you would for something like 1309 or the big boy or whatever. We still have to grid the barrel and inspect it and so on. So we have the same things ahead of us.
Because you already have a diesel locomotive that's able to do excursions with a full-size train, and you have a doodlebug for when you have, let's say, less passengers in the off-season, what advantages does a steam locomotive like this tank engine provide you?
There is a certain draw for folks to a steam locomotive. Having a steam locomotive takes you back to a different time and place. Even though the diesel is only about 17 years older, it's still a diesel. So people want to see a steam locomotive. They want to hear it, smell it, and it's a completely different type of power for a train. So, we wanted to offer that experience. And to be quite honest with you, a couple of us just wanted one. So it was a good fit for us as far as size goes, location to get it home and everything. So we wanted a steam locomotive. It was there. We figured it'd be a good thing for the passengers to experience. So we did it.
You came, you saw, you bought, and you'll be firing it up one of these days.
One of these days.
Ed Kapuzinski asks, how do you effectively carve out a niche for train rides in an area that already has Strasburg, M&H, WKNS, and the Wilmington and Western, all within a few hours' drive? Is it location, packaging, pricing, or your innate charm? His words, not mine.
Well, that question also said about the desire to ride a Conrail caboose, and as far as Ed he can be told that it's me in that caboose. But no, in all seriousness, a lot of what we do, as far as our trips goes, is very family oriented. We keep our prices down to a level that a family can come out, they can afford to come ride the train, they can enjoy themselves, and then still have the money to go get lunch, go get dinner, go to one of the other local attractions. It's geared very much so to families. And that's, I think, what is drawing people to us right now. I mean, the novelty of a different ride, the pricing, the location. I mean, some people have said it's close. We have some families in Kutztown that literally will walk to the railroad and ride every weekend that we run because the kids like it. So that's kind of where our repeat customers are coming from, is that ability to come back for a reasonable price.
Building up a local ridership from your community who perhaps otherwise could feel like, oh, it's a special thing and I could do it anytime I want, and maybe that holds them back. Keeping the price low so that it seems like, oh, it's cheap enough that they could do it pretty much every weekend. That seems like a really sound strategy and a good way of being able to further embed yourself in the community. Wayne Wanzer asks, with regards to the Doodlebug, which we were talking about earlier, do you plan on operating on other days other than your regular scheduled operations for school trips and other small events in the future?
We do now. We actually run the big train. We'll take the diesel out in the coach and a caboose or whatever for various schools and daycares and so on. So we do charter the train out as well for parties for different organizations and so on. So whether it's the Doodlebug or the locomotive hauled train, we do that and offer different packages and then have it available.
Kenny Broomfield asks, if money was no object, what would you do to the line or anything associated with it? Locomotives, structures, expansion, etc.
If money was no object and we could do whatever we'd like, many of us have talked about how scenic the other section of the railroad is beyond Kutztown, the section that was never built. Because when you travel from Kutztown up through Lenhartsville and up into Hamburg, the right-of-way has tunnels and everything on it, some pretty big bridges and so on. And we would love to be able to run up and go through some of those areas as far as scenery. It's just incredible up there. That would be, as far as the railroad goes, would be our dream if we could, with no money being an issue. Just we'd build that and go up that way. The other thing is we'd have a Reading I-8 Camelback to pull the trains, but money is an issue. So
yes, and also being able to have the means to pull off the restoration with a skilled volunteer base as well. You mentioned the importance of the people. How important are the volunteers that help out with your track work, your restorations, your operations?
The Allentown Auburn is not a nonprofit organization. It's not a club. It is indeed a for-profit business. So they're not really volunteers per se. So I mean, they are important. I mean, that's the guys that come out and work and stuff. I mean, that is how we take care of everything.
I gotcha. Chris Kovacs is asking if you have any plans for expansion of the line You talk about it as if money were no object. Do you think that there's a time frame in which you could be looking at that type of expansion?
No. Money would truly have to be no object to make that expansion. I mean, you'd have to put a crossing across the 4-lane highway and all the right-of-way reverted back to the landowners. So there's no possible way we could ever do that. That is truly a dream and completely fantasy.
You have an exciting 2018 ahead for you with beginning this restoration, but obviously you have a full season's worth of excursions. What are some of the events that you have planned that you're excited about?
My favorite train is our trick-or-treat pumpkin trains that we run in October every year. Seeing the kids pick out the pumpkins and stuff, that's just fun. I mean, the kids truly are a blast to watch and get their candy and stuff. That's the one I like the most. We have our very popular Firefly Express and so on. So we have very similar schedule that we had last year. We're running again this year. And hopefully we have the same interest that we've had in past years.
I think so. I always hear about the developments that are going on in your neck of the woods and keep thinking to myself, I just need to drive a couple hours further east than I usually do to make it out there, because it seems like there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, and what you're able to do with what you have to work with seems pretty incredible. One more question for you here, Mike, is at the end of the day, when you think about everything that you've put into building this company, building its operations, what are you most thankful for?
Well, the thing I'm most thankful for is the help that I have. The guys are great. My wife's contributions are, that's the stuff I'm most grateful for is that support. The guys come out, they work, their compensation is minimal, and everybody is upbeat and they're involved and they're enthusiastic. That right there is what I'm most thankful for, is basically the railroad family that we have. Like I said, that's the sole thing that I'm most grateful for.
Their website is Allentown and AuburnRR.com. I'll have links in the show notes for you. They of course are on Facebook as well. Mike, thank you so much for joining us here on the Roundhouse and sharing the story of this railroad. I think it's really commendable in this day and age. When we think of tourist railroads, we think of, typically on the national level, we think of ones that have been around for decades and decades. But here you are, and you've started one in just the past few years, and already you've made a solid business of it, and you're able to expand your rolling stock and your connections with the community, and I think that's really to be commended. So I look forward to seeing what's down the rails for you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and for everybody who's out there listening, I mean, keep a watch, because this year is going to be some other things coming to the railroad that will be of interest to people, and hopefully we can get them turned around and back in service and out there for people to enjoy. We had some different rolling stock coming, different locomotives, both steam and diesel. Stay tuned.
Very good. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. Take care.
And now, the question of the day.
Your question of the day for this episode is, what is your favorite tourist railroad? Could be a brand new one like the Allentown and Auburn. Could be a long-standing one like Strasburg. Let me know. TheRoundhousePodcast.com. Links to social media are there. We're on Apple Podcasts, so if you want regular episodes delivered to your phone, you can subscribe through there. We're also on Spotify, so you can search The Roundhouse on Spotify. Thank you guys for tuning in, and remember, as always, that The Roundhouse is our house.